Good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Quinn from Johns Hopkins University, and I would like to wish everyone a very happy St. Patrick's Day. The parade will be going on during lunchtime, but there's posters to see and networking here. But New York is a wonderful place for St. Patrick's Day parade. So I have the distinct honor and pleasure this morning of introducing Roger Glass, who is the director of the Fogarty International Center, and he is the associate director for the entire National Institutes of Health for international research. And in that capacity, he advises the director of the NIH, and he collates with all the other institutes of this research body, and in a sense, therefore, he is my indirect boss, since I do that for NIAID. So everyone pretty much knows Roger Glass as the director of the Fogarty, and the Fogarty has been all over the world in its training capacities, research activities, and many other activities over its years. And that is 50 years. This is the celebration of the 50th year of the founding of the Fogarty International Center. But I will leave that discussion really to Roger. Rather, because all of you know Roger in his capacity as director, you probably don't know how he got to that position. And I would actually like all of you to know the winding road of Roger Glass as he made his way into the field of global health. So Roger is a graduate of Harvard University, both medical school and undergraduate. He got a Fulbright and spent time at the University of Buenos Aires. And upon completion of his medical training, he then entered the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in 1977 as an EIS officer, and cut his teeth really in global health in those very early years by going to Bangladesh. And we heard some of that in one of the sessions yesterday. What I didn't know is that he took time out somewhere along this pathway and went to Sweden, where he obtained his doctoral degree, PhD, at the University of Gothenburg. He then joined the National Institutes of Health, worked in the Laboratory of Infectious Diseases, and worked on rotavirus, norovirus, and cholera, the leading causes of infectious diarrhea, morbidity, and mortality, particularly in children. Upon developing those research skills, he then left and went back to the Centers for Disease Control and became chief of the lab on viral gastroenteritis, and left CDC and rejoined NIH as the director of the Fogarty International Center in 2006, 12 years ago. What's of interest is that in all of his travels, he has developed a fluency in 5 languages, so he is truly a citizen of the world. He's been recognized for many of these activities. And I just want to list a few of the honors, and then we'll hear from Roger. So one of the most important awards you can receive at CDC is the Charles Shephard Lifetime Scientific Achievement Award for all of his activities in the development of the rotavirus vaccine, his work dedicated in cholera and other viral diseases. He's the recipient of the Charles Merieux Annual Award. He's received the Albert Sabin Gold Medal, one of the most prestigious awards for vaccine development. He's a member of the National Academy of Medicine, many other organizations, too many to list. But this year, he is the recipient of 2 awards. And I think one will resonate with this group very much. 2018 Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter Humanitarian Award. That's being given by the National Foundation of Infectious Diseases in May. It is public, so I was allowed to speak that. But just 3 nights ago, I think it was, Research America had their annual awards meeting, and he is the recipient of the Jeffrey Bean Builders of Science Award for his research and advocacy efforts in global health. What we learned as an aside yesterday in the Women's Leader session in global health is that he's been very fortunate throughout all of this to be married to a dean of the University of Texas Medical School, former director of pediatrics at Emory, Barbara Stoll, who really has served as a partner and as a mentor. Everyone needs a mentor, and that has been one of his most important mentors in life. And Barbara's just a wonderful individual. But I'm going to close with a quote. This is for the Humanitarian Award that he is about to receive. This quote is from Matthew Santasham. He's at Hopkins, one of my colleagues there. And I will stop after this quote. For 3 decades, Dr. Glass has been a global champion for research on rotavirus, the development of safe and effective and affordable rotavirus vaccines, and their inclusion in national programs for childhood immunization. Dr. Glass is not only an outstanding individual, internationally recognized scientist, but also a tireless advocate for health equity and delivery of the most effective vaccines to children throughout the world. Beyond these scientific and policy contributions, Dr. Glass has trained and mentored countless young individuals and scientists, many of whom have now gone on to leadership positions worldwide. He has instilled in trainees a love for science, academic rigor and integrity, and most above all, a commitment to the public good. Please rise and let's congratulate Roger Glass. Yeah, you bet. That was my pleasure.
Oh. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for that gracious introduction. And Keith, thanks for giving me a few moments to thank this audience. I have slides up there, maybe? The green? Oh, they're up on the other side. Great. Well, at Fogarty, we're very close to CUGH because 10 years ago, 2009, we hosted the first meeting of CUGH on the NIH campus. We had there 7 presidents of universities, not just departments of medicine or schools of public health or nursing or whatever. And they got together to pool their resources and to recognize that global health was huge on campuses throughout the country, that the expansion of global health went from infectious diseases to chronic diseases, that by putting it on university campuses, it would include other schools of law, of business, of economics, of engineering that should be brought into the global health space. There was really an upsurge of interest, and the time for global health had come. The importance of the network was critical. We were so uncertain about how many people would come to that first meeting of CUGH that we organized our network meetings on the shoulders of the CUGH to make sure there were some people in the audience. That's how, so when I look at the audience today and last year and the year before, over 1,500 people, it's really a tribute to the fact that this was an idea whose time has come. And Keith, you've done an incredible job to pull this organization together. So I really want to thank you. Now, last year at this meeting, there was no more important time to have a group that would lead in global health. You know, we had some trips along the way last year. We had a near-death experience, and we had to come together with our survival bracelets, and many of you have your survival bracelets on. Raise your hands if you have one. Okay, and we have more of them for you, but we really were not certain of the future, of whether we would be dismantled or intact. And it was because at this meeting last year, where there was so much support for what we do, so much recognition from our grantees, our alumni, and the like, that you started writing. And you started writing grantees here, ridiculously important issues. The New York Times, Stat, Chris Beyer, all over, USA Today. The hue and cry was tremendous in support of the Fogarty Center. Michelle Barry and Derek Yack, both members of our board, saying that it would erode trust in America's leadership in global health. Again, another article from Art Reingold, Berkeley. All of you people came together. Our grantee, our first grantee in Syria, the only Syrian grantee from NIH on smoking, writing. JAMA, New England Journal. I didn't see Lancet up there, but I'm sure Richard will be speaking to our 50th anniversary celebration in May. Anyhow, it was this hue and cry that really led us to reassess who we were, to hone our communications messages, with the appreciation that 100% of our grants go to support American researchers reaching out into the world and our foreign partners to participate in collaborations, partnership, and training. As Fogarty said, I've always recognized that just as disease knows no national boundaries, so also the benefits of medical research, and indeed research itself can know no boundaries. That was our founder 50 years ago. Well, over the past year, since Congress granted us and increased our budget slightly, and we're waiting for the final remarks, we've advanced research on child health. We've moved into the chronic disease area. We've been involved in global health security in the areas around the Ebola-affected area, and we have new grants in that session, in that area. We've also been the recipients of events hosted by our partners here in Peru, by Patty Garcia, the group from University of Washington, Cayetano, Heredia, and Marcos. At the AIDS meeting last July, where our first grantees, now all outstanding individuals in the HIV field, you can see Slim and Qureshi, Abdul Karim, and Bill Pop, and Linda Gale Becker, the president of the AIDS Society, and James Hakim and others. Really amazing people who have grown up through Fogarty grants and have gone on to shape the AIDS agenda for the world. We were hosted by the American Neurologic Association, the American Heart Association. These are areas of global health that weren't considered global health perhaps 10 years ago. And here you can see the youth of this next generation of cardiologists in global health, our newest generation. The Tropical Medicine Group have been incredible advocates for our programs and what we've done in global health with our partners. And of course, my staff here, maybe I could get my staff to stand up. Peter Kilmark's my deputy, Ann Puderbaugh in charge of communications, Flora Katz over on the far corner, Stacy Wallach was here, and Kevin Bialy, they may be still sleeping. Oh, Ken Bridboard right behind me. There's Kevin over there. These people have been absolutely incredible, along with a staff of about 70. In January, the folks in Kenya had a birthday cake, cut a birthday cake for us, even though the government was shut down. So we have to thank the support that they were given there. And finally, we had our session yesterday. We've had nearly 1,000 Fogarty Fellows and Scholars in this program. Pierce Gardner was one of our first representatives handling this program. These people have really been an incredible contribution to the global health workforce. And in their orientation, Mary Woolley has introduced the importance of communication, good communication, so that we can get our message out. When we started 10 years ago, my communications director said that we were the best kept secret in global health. We are no longer, and we're alive and well today. So here's Francis Collins wearing his green bracelet in support and celebrating the fact that we're still intact and working. So we are here. We're looking forward to the next 10, 20, 50 years in global health, supporting you, CUGH, and your partnerships, and thanking you all for the incredible support that you've given us throughout the year and for many years to come. Just want to direct you to our website, because we have an incredible website for all of NIH on global health activities and funding. I think funding might be important for some of you. And also, I want to make sure that you know that on May 1st, we'll be having our 50th anniversary at the NIH campus. You can sign up. Admission's free for all friends of Fogarty, but if you don't sign up, you won't get a seat in the main room. So we welcome you all and want to make sure that you're aware of that. It may well be webcast. So this is my huge thank you to CUGH. We wouldn't be here this year with such enthusiasm if it hadn't been for the incredible support that we've gotten from the global health community, from all of you doing things I know about and things I don't know about. So thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everyone. And first of all, congratulations, Roger. Really well-deserved, all these accolades. And thanks for the great work that Fogarty does all over the world. I'm Wafaa El-Sadr, and I'm from ICAP at Columbia University. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the great debate, the global health debate. May I have the first slide, please? Okay, so today we're going to be having a debate that's going to be led by two very eminent individuals who have been involved in global health for many, many years. And what I'm going to be doing is moderating this debate. So let's see the next slide. And then I'll tell you a little bit about our speakers. Okay, so this is the debate statement. The statement is the following: equity is the defining objective of global health in the 21st century. Think about that for a second. And then I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you agree with this statement. And we're going to do a very scientific polling. It's called the eyeballing technique. Okay, I got it. Okay. And then please, thank you. And then please raise your hand if you do not agree with the statement. Okay, good, we got it. So thank you for your vote. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about our speakers today. So let me start with a bit of a description of Dr. Cheryl Hilton, and she is going to be arguing the affirmative for this statement. And Dr. Hilton, Cheryl, who I've known for many years, is the founding dean of the College of, next slide. Oops. Okay, here we are. So Dr. Hilton is the founding dean of the College of Global Public Health at New York University, here in New York City. And prior to joining NYU, she served as president and CEO of Legacy Foundation. And this is a leading national foundation that is dedicated to tobacco control. During her tenure, she created some very innovative programs, all focusing on tobacco control, including an acclaimed national youth tobacco prevention campaign. Prior to her work at the Legacy Foundation, Dr. Hilton had played numerous roles at Columbia University, including as chairperson of the Socio-Medical Sciences Department at the Mailman School of Public Health, and also as associate dean at the Mailman School of Public Health as well. She holds a DRPH from Columbia University's School of Public Health with distinction and an MPH in Public Administration from NYU in Health Policy and Planning. Welcome, Cheryl. And then our second speaker is Dr. Richard Horton, and he's going to be arguing against the statement. And he's the editor of the Lancet. He was born in London, and an important factoid is that he's half Norwegian. I don't know what that implications of this for the debate. He qualified in physiology and medicine with honors from the University of Birmingham, and he's an honorary professor at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, as well as at the University of Oslo. And in 2016, he was appointed to a high-level working group for the health and human rights of women, children, adolescents, and chaired the expert group for the High-Level Commission on Health, Employment, and Economic Growth. And many of you, of course, know Dr. Horton for his enormous importance and his voice, in particular, in the arena of global health. So this is just a brief introduction to our speakers. Then I'm going to tell you about the debate structure. So we have a wonderful person here who's going to be timing this, and this is going to be done with extreme precision. So we have first, I took the poll, so we have a sense of how this audience is distributed. We'll have an affirmative, constructive by Cheryl Hilton. That'll be precisely for 5 minutes from the podium, to be followed by negative, constructive by Richard Horton, also for precisely 5 minutes. Then we're going to be sitting at the chairs, and then Richard will do a negative rebuttal for exactly 3 minutes, followed by an affirmative rebuttal by Cheryl Hilton, also for 3 minutes. And then we'll open it up to all of you. And that's the very important part of the debate. We need you to be thinking about the statement, and we want to hear your voices and your feedback and so on. So be prepared that we're going to have sufficient time for a discussion Q&A from the audience. And then at the end, I'm going to do another poll, and we'll see where we're at. Okay? So without further ado, we're going to start with Cheryl Hilton. Welcome.
Thank you, Wafaa. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm also delighted to be debating Richard Horton, of whom I'm a great admirer. My frame for the assertion I will defend is equity in the health disparities context is a public good that stabilizes society, meets key moral imperatives, and enhances global survival. It is about the gap in health and well-being between groups. Narrowing this gap is morally required. What I am not arguing against includes the urgency of effective action on climate change, which will impact the poorest, the earliest, and hardest. Indeed, it is already doing so. Nor am I arguing against reduced income disparities, increased educational opportunities. They are, of course, social determinants of health and of intrinsic value as well. Achieving health equity is a moral imperative on multiple grounds. The lack of health equity costs many lives, including 5.6 million infant and child lives each year, most of which were preventable. An estimated 30 million children will lose their lives before age 5 by 2030. Good health is a necessary precursor to achieving economic and educational attainment for those lucky enough to survive to age 5. Thus, facilitating its achievement is a gateway baseline we must reach. The lack of health equity is a destabilizing force in societies in that it leaves large swaths of people out of the productive workforce due to health conditions and robs people of hope in their futures and that of their children. The world has agreed through the ambitious SDG process that health equity is its key social determinant, and its key social determinants are priorities, and thus has called for good health and well-being, an end to poverty, and quality education. They have also called for clean water and sanitation and action on climate change. These collectively are the recipe for success in achieving health equity. Add the political will, and we have a fighting chance to succeed. We must, and as Gandhi said, the ones who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. Health is recognized as a human right, and the late Jonathan Mann famously said health rights are human rights. If we fail to appropriately prioritize health equity, we are placing the rights of the poor and undereducated with little access to health and well-being beneath others. This is a powerful message to send. Health equity has received the least attention in large measure due to the persistent myth that health is synonymous with health care. Rather, health is a societal asset that drives many social goods and indeed improves society for all. It is a combination of many factors: nutrition, development programs, community intervention, adequate income, and health services. Achieving health equity is economically feasible and an economic imperative for optimal, positive global development. Failing to do so carries high opportunity costs. Those population sectors, nations, subregions, subgroups that have received the least attention are precisely the groups among whom the most can and should be achieved efficiently and effectively. Past neglect has created high prevalence reservoirs of need, and the time and effort expended generates a disproportionate upside per life saved, considerably less than the efforts among better off groups. Health equity enables people to contribute to society to their fullest, thereby contributing to growing sustainable economies. Health equity positions society to tackle other problems by creating the hope and optimism which motivates actions to positively shape our future. Health equity creates funds to invest elsewhere by adding more to the tax base through larger participation in the labor force and greater overall prosperity, funds that can be redirected to other societal needs. It adds to the revenue of governments that use evidence-based approaches to tax policy to lower the burden of consumption-based risk factors by applying tax policy smartly. Tobacco, alcohol, and now increasingly sugar-sweetened beverage taxes are examples, but others will emerge as well. These funds can be redirected to other government programs within and outside of direct health services. Notably, health and all policy approaches again demonstrate that health does not equal health care. Setting a high bar for health equity explicitly says that it is an essential global priority, but not the exclusive one, can create momentum, as was the case for the MDGs. The SDGs can bring the same promise if we reach for the stars. As Martin Luther King was fond of saying, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Let's bend it faster. Thank you.
Superb, Cheryl. I must surely concede. Equity is hardwired into every possible definition of global health. It would be insane for me to argue otherwise. But this debate is not about a particular word at a particular moment in time. It is about who we are, you and I, this most powerful and yet most vulnerable of species. It's about who we want to be, how we want to live our lives, one with another, on this wounded world of ours. This debate is about everything we hold dear, those we love, the ideas we believe in, the hopes we have for our common future. So pause. What is wrong with our societies today? Is it really too little equity? Equity is a situation in which everyone is treated fairly and equally. I wish that equity could be global health's principal concern, but it cannot be. Global health is not about equity, it is about power. Whether you are black, female or poor, indigenous, homeless or unemployed, global health is about the power of the few over the many. The power of the rich over the poor, the power of the advantaged over the disadvantaged. Equity is important, but equity is not directly concerned with power. Indeed, the idea of equity risks perpetuating disempowerment and injustice by disregarding the most important forces that damage and distort our lives, our communities, and our ecologies. So if equity is not the defining objective of global health, then what is? The answer is liberty. Liberty is anterior to equity. Fairness can never be achieved unless each of us has realized our aspiration for self-determination. Liberty is necessary to enable any kind of association on equal terms. The liberty to think, to believe, to love, desire, create, express, communicate, and live without interference or coercion. This is what it means to be human. This is the precursor to a fairer society. And health, of course, has an explicit connection to liberty. Ill health restricts and depletes our liberties. If we're sick, our freedom to enjoy our lives, to achieve our hopes, to reach our objectives is compromised. Creating health in a society protects and advances our liberty. Health is an instrument to create the motive force, liberty, for justice and equity. But why liberty really matters, why it is the central objective of global health, is because of human dignity. Dignity demands that each of us is an end in ourselves, not a means to someone else's end. We are not objects that can be tied by the unjust ropes of society. We will not be humiliated by those with power over us. Dignity is our right to live in a decent society, and liberty is our shield in that struggle. The sovereignty of the individual is the precursor of human dignity, and without dignity, there can be no equity. Identifying liberty as the touchstone of global health has important consequences for our conception of justice. If the objective of global health is liberty, and I argue strenuously that it is, we in the global health community have a duty to hold accountable and challenge those governments and other sources of power that deprive people of their liberty. Authoritarian regimes, military force, religious dogmatists, corporate power, and their tools of exploitation, repression, discrimination, and censorship. Equity without liberty leads us towards oppressive conformity, the death of the human spirit, the annihilation of all that it means to be human. Liberty as the path to equity is emancipation from enslavement, the rebirth, in Emma Goldman's words, of the social soul. Liberty leads us, if not to paradise, at least to the possibility of realizing our full humanity, finding better ways to discover truths about ourselves and the world, improving our government and governance through open, robust, deliberative debate, and embracing our diversity, not merely tolerating difference, but welcoming and celebrating it. So for the sake of every person in our world who is today suffering ill health, indignity, disempowerment, discrimination, exclusion, repression, and yes, inequity, I urge you to vote against this motion and to vote instead for the bright star of liberty.
Stop. I think now Richard will rebut Cheryl's arguments for 3 minutes precisely.
Sorry, you got me again. Cheryl spoke about the moral and economic imperative of equity, and I agree. But on January the 6th, 1941, Franklin D. Roosevelt stood to give his State of the Union address to Congress. His speech was about national security, the meaning of democracy, and the fundamental values on which society should be based. And his words brought into our lexicon what have become known as the 4 freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear. And within those freedoms, he cited adequate health care as one of the platforms for liberty. Roosevelt's conception of the responsibility to protect liberty through health became the foundation for the more recent idea of human security, so powerfully articulated by Amartya Sen and Sadako Agata in their 2003 Commission on Human Security. Indeed, Amartya Sen has made what is perhaps the definitive case for liberty as global health's defining objective in his book, Development as Freedom. Sen's arguments remain powerful to this day. The expansion of freedom as the primary end and the principal means of development. Individuals should be seen as active agents of change, not passive recipients of dispensed benefits. The promotion of freedom matters. It matters because freedom enables people to live the kind of lives they have reason to value. In the 18th and 19th centuries, at a time of the birth of science in the service of society, liberty was the siren call of a progressive movement for civil and political rights. And we need to reclaim that idea of liberty today. We need to reanimate the Enlightenment project for liberty. Indeed, if liberty is the litmus test of global health, then we must embark on a capacious political journey towards social justice, defined by a vision for humanity based first on the liberty of the individual to flourish to the fullest possible extent without harming others, and with that society of free, pluralist identities becoming the basis for any notion of equity. The goal, the defining objective of global health is not equity. It is to remove the chains that enslave the human mind, the chains that subjugate us to the judgments, the humiliations, and the punishments of others, the chains that allow those with unaccountable power to strip away our dignity. And liberty is the acid that will dissolve those chains. Liberty enables us to engage with one another in deeper and more intimate exchange, to describe and to understand our world and ourselves, to imagine and to realize a different world, a truer and more just world, to motivate us for a future that can indeed be based on equity. Equity, equity, as the defining objective of global health, yes, but tomorrow, not today.
Cheryl, your turn, please, to rebut Richard's argument.
Who moved my cheese? That was an eloquent argument, and it was an eloquent argument about something about which I care deeply, and that is social justice, and liberty is key to social justice. That said, as we sit here today, and by the time we leave this meeting, many, many people will have died of preventable death. Some of those deaths will be the result of the regimes under which they operate and their lack of liberty. But a vast majority of those deaths will be related to other factors, and those factors are what we are all about. This is the Global Health Conference, and yes, I agree, we are politics. If we aren't politics, we will get nowhere. Every fight that has been fought, from the one Wafaa and her colleagues fought for AIDS, to those in the room who I'm sure fought for justice in the Ebola fight, is a political battle. And I do concede to my formidable co-debater, colleague, that liberty is elusive and freedom is elusive. Melinda Gates made a very good point. She talked once about the 4 freedoms Richard described, and she said there should be a 5th, and the 5th should be the right to survive. The reason I use the data I did in my opening statement is that tens of millions, 30 million to be exact, between now and 2030, children will never get a chance to enjoy the liberties that are being described by Richard because they will be deprived of them. And I concede that some of those deaths are probably related very directly to the political structures within their country, but they are also related to our inability to step up and lead a movement, frankly, in my opinion, for something like a global health treaty that brings everyone into the table the way the Framework Convention for Tobacco Control did, and starts to set the rules for the world around certain basic issues. Once you have those rules, I've been shocked to see how the Framework Convention for Tobacco Control can move the world. We now have a world where tobacco use is declining virtually everywhere. In some cases, the numbers are rising, but the rates are declining virtually everywhere. And one primary reason is a global consensus to make that happen. I concede to Richard we need a global consensus that we deserve liberty, but we should avoid the illusion that we are living in a country where liberty exists. I live in a democratic nation. I'm a joint citizen of Canada and the US. I will let you guess where I feel I have greater liberty. So I close with a simple statement. Health disparities are here in the here and now. We must find a way to grapple with them. That is not to say that achieving liberty for all is not a lofty goal, but it is not one that is going to save the babies who will die tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Now we're going to open it up for questions and answers from the audience. Please come to the microphones, and it would be good if people make brief statements, or if you have a question, so we can take as many comments as possible. I think you were there first. Introduce yourself very briefly, and then brief comment or question.
From University of Pittsburgh. My question is for both of you. Where is the statement that inequity is bad for the rich and the powerful as well, from the work of Richard Wilkinson and others? So they have an interest in equity because, you know, whether they will die by revolution or the guillotine, maybe they should have an interest in narrowing the health disparity gap.
I addressed it to some extent in my remarks, but I think what you're saying is that there's a lack of equity across all groups, and to some extent that is in fact the case. Clearly there is more inequity among some groups than in others, and the point I was making is that the cost effectiveness of reaching the very large proportions of people who still lack basic health equity is more cost effective than the alternative. I think, however, what the point you may be getting at, and I think it is an important one, is our failure to address these inequities put everyone at risk, because we become a world that is without a soul. And if you're a world without a soul, souls will go to very dark places, and that's dangerous for the whole world.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Richard, yeah.
I agree about that, and that's why Emma Goldman said that liberty is the instrument for the birth of the social soul. I think it comes down to a conception of what is the cause of some of the great predicaments facing our societies. And to me, if we're going to address in a democratic, participatory, transparent way what these issues are, that requires us to have the freedom to participate. And if you look in the world today at so many countries, that freedom to take part in a pluralist discussion and debate in society about what matters to the value of that society is not allowed. Whether it's freedom of the press, civil society organizations, laws against LGBTQ rights, the freedom to have a safe abortion. So many issues in global health are determined by the withdrawal of liberties. And so that's why I say liberty is anterior to equity. Without the freedom to take part in that debate, to address all of those issues that we care about in this room, we will struggle. And ultimately, health is a political struggle for the freedom to judge what's important in your society.
Okay, thank you. And I also urge the respondents to also be brief as well. We have a lot of questions. Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Hani Sraq from University of Texas Medical Branch and was also with People's Health Movement. I agree that we are not going towards the equity. Equity is not about goodwill. It's about challenging big interests in the world. Right now, we are moving, instead of moving towards the redistribution of power, resources, and wealth, as correctly articulated by the Commission of Social Determinants and Health, we are moving towards more concentration of power, wealth, and bad governance. The Sustainable Development Goals, similar to Millennium Development Goals, failed to address the structural determinants of ill health. Again, it didn't address the broken intellectual property right regime, which allowed pharmaceutical companies to profit 10 times of the manufacture price of a drug without policy for global prices. Also, it failed to put indicators that account for equity within and between countries. Reaching certain rates of mortality and morbidity is not about equity. The global governance system...
I think we need to take more comments from others. Do you have a question, or you're...
The question is how to move from trying to work within the system to challenge the big
Okay.
interest and work outside system and allow challenge for people to
Thank you.
express themselves.
Thank you. Does anyone want to respond to that briefly? Or no? Okay, thank you for your comments. Yeah, appreciate it. Yes, go ahead, please.
Shaden Enschle. I'm from the Navajo Nation, and I disagree with both of you.
Okay, but make it brief.
I think sovereignty is number one. We were here 1,000 years ago, and we will be here in 1,000 years. Every day, our sovereignty is challenged by our own government, by outside interests. They've done enough damage, and I will stick up for my sovereignty because that's what I believe.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, yes, please, go ahead.
I originally had a question about abortion, but I think that has been addressed. So I'm going to change my question. I would like to hear from these passionate debaters one example where equity has prevailed and created a sea change, and one example of where liberty, social justice, has done the same.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we start with Cheryl?
Okay, I'm going to give you both in one example. And the example is Liberia, an emerging democracy with a spectacular leader on the verge of breaking through into a thriving economy. And all it took was one epidemic to set back the clock. So that's one example of what can happen when we are not minding the global health realities on the ground. Another example that comes to mind is the recent work of UNICEF to double down on intervening on the least served women and children, and succeeding in, for every dollar invested, virtually doubling the amount of lives saved. So that's a great success story, as is maternal mortality. But when something is still at 300,000, I have zero comfort level calling it a success story.
Richard?
First of all, on equity, I come from the United Kingdom, and I would say that the birth of the National Health Service in 1948 was after the destruction of much of continental Europe, was a founding statement of a national commitment to equity, in terms of which is now under threat. The example of liberty I would use actually is a broader political example, and that is Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Women, which to me is the founding document of gender equality. And ever since she published that book, there has been a struggle, again, which is based upon power and freedom of women to participate in democratic societies. And that matters as much today as it did in the late 18th century.
Okay, let's go back to this microphone. Yes.
Hi, my name is Charles. Obviously, liberty, equity can't be understated. Oui, on ne peut être contre la vertu. But considering the precarious state of our planet, which sustains all communities, are these objectives still too human-centered? Or should we aim, since this is the 21st century, more towards planetary or One Health objectives?
Okay, thank you. Richard, you want to tackle that?
Well, as a journaler who in some sense was a midwife for planetary health, of course I completely agree with you. But then we have to look at what are the determinants of the destruction of our planetary resources, and those are unaccountable sources of power. And the only way to hold those sources of power accountable is to emancipate people so that they can hold those sources of power accountable. And in too many countries, in too many communities, they're not able to do so. So my desire for liberty is not liberty for its own sake, it's liberty with a political purpose.
Thank you. Cheryl, do you have something to add? Or? No. Okay. Yes, please, go ahead.
Hi, Mary White, Wright State University. I'm an academic and nerdy one at that, so I'm curious if you could define your terms a bit more specifically. What is equity? It could be equal health care, equal access to health care, equal health care dollars. Liberty includes the freedom to oppress. Where is the conversation that my health depends on your health?
Okay.
The recognition of our interdependence and the principle of ethics of social solidarity, that we need to work together.
Cheryl.
Well, I'm happy to respond to that. I certainly hope I did address that. The definition of health is, a state of maximal well-being and health. It's the short version of the UN definition of health, and it is extremely difficult to obtain for a variety of reasons for anyone, but it is more so difficult to obtain if you have educational, income, and other deficits that are brought upon you by society. I think the one point I would definitely want to drive home in your concept that your health affects my health, and of course in tobacco that was a turning point when a global movement really was born around exposure to secondhand smoke after decades of an industry suppressing that fact, frankly, very successfully. So my point is that health in all policies is the unifying theme. And health in all policies really does require that we look at all sectors of society, from communities to schools to governments to agencies to corporate America, to determine how we can optimally provide the building blocks of optimal health. And we have not done that, though there are many steps happening in that direction, and when they happen, and I think this is really instructive, frequently those policies are much stronger drivers of health outcomes than the things that we traditionally think about in terms of delivering direct services to people.
In terms of definition of liberty, I would go to Isaiah Berlin's definition, which is about positive and negative liberty. A negative liberty is about non-interference in my life or your life, and a positive liberty is about enhancing your agency. It's a much more positive activist dimension to liberty. So I think if we're thinking about what is the connection between that and social solidarity and our interdependence, which I fully agree with, it's what conditions do we live in that can promote that kind of interdependence and solidarity. And I would argue that if we're oppressed, if we have the chains of society binding us, and that we're not able to live free lives, then the ability to build solidarity, to build that independence, is deeply compromised. And this is Emma Goldman's argument. If you know Emma Goldman, she was a great anarchist writer, and she saw that this birth of social solidarity, which she completely believed in, could only be fully achieved if you stripped away the power structures that restrict us from seeing the sympathy one with another.
Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time, I'm told by the organizers. I think for next year, I'm going to urge that we have more time for the questions and answers. So I'm going to go back to, again, the statement, the debate statement, and ask this audience to vote again. For those of you who agree with the debate statement, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Put your hands down. For those of you who disagree with the debate statement, please raise your hand. It's a tough one. I think we have equipoise. Which is actually very important, which means that this debate must continue in the halls of this conference and beyond, and maybe in a major journal. I think we have reached an interesting conclusion to this debate with equipoise on the argument. I guess the argument, is it equity or is it liberty or is it something else? So I would like to end by thanking all of you first, and I want to thank our debaters who did an amazing job in responding to this challenge, and to all of you who came to the microphone eager to ask questions, and also Ms. Roxas, our great timekeeper. Without her, we would not have been able to do this. So thank you, and continue the conversation.